Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
And I get the feeling you've been cheated.
It is Tuesday, March 9th, 2021. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, the COVID-19 relief bill vote is imminent in the House. May get pushed to tomorrow, but it is imminent. Meanwhile, Republicans go into overdrive to suppress the vote around the country, making passage of H.R. 1 more urgent, making Joe Manchin's wiggle room on filibuster reform more crucial. Meanwhile, the CDC says fully vaccinated people can conjugate without masks. Lula convictions quashed. Expected to challenge Bolsonaro in 2022. 12 Republican AGs sue Joe Biden's administration for including social cost in calculating greenhouse emissions, practice that has been done for over a decade. White House endorses the Pro-Union PRO Act. And in the wake of emptying the Berks Detention Center in Pennsylvania, a record number of children are in adult jail detention at the border. Meanwhile, the entire staff of the Nevada Democratic Party quits because progressives won the leadership votes. Following Biden's appointment of Tim Wu, Lena Khan to be named to the Federal Trade Commission. Good news for those people who are hoping for antitrust action by this administration. All this and more on today's program. There we go. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the program. Thanks for joining us. As always, Emma Vigeland is here. Emma, how are you today?
I'm doing well. I'm very excited about it being over 50 degrees today in New York.
Spring feels like it is, we're going to get a taste of it at least this week, and we'll see. But I don't know that there's ever been congregate. I'm sorry, not conjugate. Apologies.
I don't know if CDC
sorry about that.
made an effort to rule on that.
I had congregate down there, and I couldn't read it, and I said conjugate. But nevertheless, you can still probably, if you're in an English class or any type of language class, feel free to conjugate. Anyways, we should say that yes, spring is broken, and I don't know that I've ever looked forward to spring more than this year, than any year in the past.
Oh my goodness!
Sort of like winter is wrapped up with the pandemic, and I'm very excited, and I am sadly not one of those people who have been vaccinated yet. There are a lot of people who have been across the country. 31 million people have now been fully vaccinated. Nearly 60 million have received at least one dose. The numbers start to get a little bit confusing at this point because we now have the introduction of a one-shot vaccine. That's the Johnson & Johnson. The Pfizer and the Moderna, of course, are two-shot vaccines. you have a decent amount of protection after the first vaccination. Obviously, you got to wait a couple of weeks before this kicks in. That's the same with really any vaccination, I believe. Certainly it is with the flu vaccine. And the CDC has announced as of today that if you are fully vaccinated,
which they categorize as being 2 weeks out from your final shot, if you're getting this 2 weeks out from either the J&J shot or the second dose of the Pfizer and Moderna shot.
And you can now spend time together indoors and unmasked with other people who are fully vaccinated. And this is going to be a weird period of time.
Yeah. Where
over the next couple of months. And frankly, I've been feeling this pressure in my own life because I am, aside from my children and aside from this plastic tarp between us, everyone else I am exposed to, more or less, has received at least one shot of the vaccine because my sister took our parents into Massachusetts. If you're over 75, you can get a vaccine for the person who brings you. My ex ended up getting waiting in line and getting an extra shot at the end of the day. My friend has some immunocompromised issues. And now I'm surrounded by people who are either partially vaccinated or close to being fully vaccinated. And you start to wonder, like, are they taking it seriously? And so it creates a very sort of strange dynamic. Now,
right.
None of those people would get together in a place en masse without me because they
conjugate,
don't,
right?
Yeah, and conjugate. But it creates an interesting dynamic. We're going to see more of this in the coming months until, and I would say, we are still a month or so out, I think, until we get to that point where there's enough. There's been enough production of vaccinations where people who really want to get one will be able to get one, at least their first shot. And so this dynamic is going to continue. This is what the CDC has announced. And part of the problem, of course, is that there's going to be a percentage. We're going to hit a point, maybe in early summer, maybe late spring, maybe midsummer, where the people who are not vaccinated are the people who don't want to get vaccinated because, of course, there is a anti-vax movement in this country. And there's also sort of one that has been empowered by Donald Trump and the Republicans, despite the fact that Donald Trump, of course, got a vaccination as soon as he left the
Well, that's why he didn't want to publicize it, was apparently to continue to appeal to the anti-vax community. So there is this weird cultural shift there where it's often associated with, say, Orange County, California moms, right, who are anti-vax. But I think it's shifted more towards cultural conservatism in the center of the country. And now seemingly conservatives are seeing this as a constituency in their party.
Yes, and to be fair, the anti-vax movement crosses, I think, ideological grounds, but certainly there is now sort of more of an ideological there's more of an ideological bent to this. And I remember that Meghan McCain clip where she said, in Israel, they're saying, get a shot, give a shot, get a shot. And or get a shot and go take a shot. Yeah,
go
exactly.
To a bar, which,
exactly.
People were skeptical if that's even true.
I don't know if that's true, but it's not hard to imagine we're going to see more of that here once we get to the supply levels where everybody who wants one has gotten one.
Yeah.
Because you don't need to publicize that. In fact, you don't want to, because you want to encourage people to still practice best practices until we can get enough people vaccinated that we're able to snuff out the coronavirus, because otherwise it runs around and it starts to mutate, and that creates problems. Now, that, of course, everything we've just talked about is really just, there's, a little bit of reading and a little bit of assessment, and you can come to these conclusions, and it's the responsible thing to do. Let's tune in on what Fox is doing, desperate for some type of narrative. When you've run out of Dr. Seuss, when you have run out of Mr. Potato Head, what are you going to put on air? Well, you go and you take former COVID deniers who are now COVID vaccine deniers.
They've evolved.
And I have to ask you, this is an amazing story, and it honestly baffles me. CDC issues new guidance today for people who've been fully vaccinated against coronavirus. This seems like very weird guidance. What do you make of it?
Well, it is weird. Here's the problem, okay? It's increasingly clear that the vaccines aren't quite as effective as that 95% headline figure was given. So the honest thing to do would be to say, look, the vaccines aren't 95% effective. They're not going to be the miracle that ends this tomorrow or in a week or a month. We're still going to have to live with this on some level. But, you know, once you're vaccinated, things do look better for you. You can drop a lot of the nonsense that, you know, we've been telling you need to do for the last year, and you can go out and you can hang out with people. But I think the CDC is very afraid that there will be cases of people getting vaccinated and sick or dying, as has happened in Israel. We know that's happened in Israel.
Yes.
And so I think that they're trying to cover their rear ends here with guidance that's totally unrealistic, essentially.
Yes. Well, lying begets lying. I mean, they should just be honest, and we would trust them if they were. Alex Berenson, I appreciate your coming on tonight. Thank you.
Could you understand what he was saying?
No. Lying begets lying.
No, that part I understood.
Yeah.
But what did Berenson actually say here?
He's claiming that people are dying and getting sick due to the COVID vaccine in Israel. That is his assertion.
Was he saying that they were dying because of the COVID vaccine, or was he saying there were people dying despite having being vaccinated?
Right, yeah.
It's increasingly clear that the vaccines aren't quite as effective as that 95% headline number. CDC is very afraid that there will be cases of people getting vaccinated and sick or dying, as has happened in Israel. Again, I don't know if it's as clear, but I think I side with not what I just thought he said, but what you thought.
Well, all right. Well, if it's 95% effective, that means it's 5% not effective.
Yeah.
That means that...
Well, he's saying it's not quite as effective as that 95% headline number.
Okay, if it's 93% effective, I mean, the average flu vaccine is effective somewhere between 50 and 70%. Because they're guessing as to what the virus is going to be, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, the bottom line is there is not going to be, it's unlikely in this country, there may be some countries, it's unlikely we're going to get to a point where we're going to have no coronavirus. What is more likely is that we're going to get to a point where the number of deaths on a daily basis is less or equivalent to what the number of deaths of the flu are on a daily basis. And the number of deaths of the flu on a daily basis in this country is somewhere between 80 and I think 90 a day.
Citing health ministry data in Israel, Israel says that the vaccine prevents 98.9% of COVID-19 deaths.
But there's still 1.1% left.
Not quite as effective as 95% if you're looking at the inverse, or if you're looking at it upside down, maybe?
I mean, this is just sort of stunning. They brought this guy on there who was more or less a COVID denier months ago, and now has become a sort of a COVID vaccine denier in the sense that it's really not that effective, just so that Tucker Carlson could at the end say they're all liars. I mean,
so
this is the project.
Waters. That's what he does every time. Tucker Carlson just throws unsubstantiated allegations out there in order to create vague skepticism about people in power, but Democrats in power specifically. He'll talk about elites, but that's usually just a dog whistle for powerful Jewish people or just people in government, right? That are on the Democratic side. And if this had been the Trump vaccine, if Trump had marketed it in that way, in the same way he chose to market those stimulus checks, I don't know that we would be seeing this, but this is clearly a constituency of vaccine deniers, of science deniers. Goes hand in hand with what we saw with climate change that the right is looking to cultivate. And so Tucker Carlson is trying to get ahead of that very, very
he's trying to position himself. Right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I guess once you have spent the past year essentially enabling people to be cavalier about something that ended up killing over 500 and nearly 50,000 Americans, and will end up probably killing close to 600,000 Americans.
Check out this tweet from October. I don't normally tweet my Fox News appearances, but this one is vital. This is the Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation has been wrong over and over. Why would anyone credit or repeat its projection of 500,000 U.S. COVID deaths by spring? That was in October.
I'd like to retweet that at some point.
And so there it is. I mean, so you have a guy bringing on a guy who has basically been paid over the course of the past year to lie to people and encourage them in some respects to not take this seriously enough that inevitably led to their deaths. Having a guy on who does the exact same thing, I don't know if he gets paid, but it seems to be at least a hobby, going out and a guy who was completely wrong, off by, I mean, a measure of probably hundreds of thousands, right? I mean, we hit 500,000 before we were out of February. And both of them sitting there basically saying at the end, summing it up, muddying the waters about the efficacy of the vaccine and ending it with, well, they're just liars. They're all liars and nobody can trust them.
It reminds me of those evangelical preachers who predict that the end times are going to happen in 2012 and that the book says it, and then they still come on the next day and will act as if nothing happened, basically. Oh, we misread it. How do you have the gall to continue to show your face in public when you're that wrong, that consistently, and wrong in order to grift, in order to...
But it's worse than that, because people have died. People, tens of hundreds of thousands of people have died because they listened to these people essentially downplay the risk that were associated with this. Never mind the people who have contracted this disease and will feel the implications for months, if not years, for the rest of their life. Never mind the families who have lost people. That, I mean, at the very least, you predict the world's going to end tomorrow. More or less, it's just sort of like, egg on my face, I'm embarrassed, as opposed to creating this type of death and destruction. But I guess if they're getting paid well, and it allows, it allows Tucker Carlson to enjoy his lifestyle, then maybe it's worth it. We got to take a quick break. We'll be back in just a moment. We've got a lot more to talk about. Wow. Tucker Carlson, what a piece of garbage. Folks, speaking of toilet stuff.
Garbage. Good transition.
Of
things we'd like to
yes,
you'd like
of
to
the flush,
right?
Exactly.
Tucker?
It's a new year. Well, it's time for a new rear. In 2021, don't just make the commitment to wash your hands every time you go poop. Go the extra mile, wash your butt. This is both Emma's and Saul, my 8-year-old son's favorite ad. Favorite ad. They love it. The brand new Hello Tushy 3.0 modern bidet attachment. It's finally here. It is stylish, is eco-friendly, easy to install, and affordable. Hello Tushy 3.0 doesn't just cleanse your butt with a precise stream of fresh water. It cleans itself. It does so before and after it's used with the Smart Spray automatic self-cleaning nozzle. This is how it works. It attaches to your toilet. It doesn't require any electricity. Doesn't require any additional plumbing. You unscrew the toilet seat. Got to change your toilet seat. I don't know, however often people do that. I do it relatively frequently because I get kids. They slam it and they break it, whatever. Very easy to do. You just screw it into the existing plumbing that you have, and it cuts toilet paper use by 80%. Sanitation is simple. The Schmutz Shield offers easy cleaning. The knobs are naturally antimicrobial. Plus, every Hello Tushy bidet comes with a 60-day risk-free guarantee and a 12-month warranty. You can upgrade to the new 3.0 model if you're already hooked on the original Hello Tushy. Or if you're new to the revolution, join millions of happy customers right now. Have a clean butt with every flush. Look, I'm not going to lie. I was very skeptical. Kyle, at one point during the pandemic, was like, we got a fancy one, and I love it. Never would go back.
Right.
I was like, I don't know if I'm ready to commit to something. Like, I'm not going to get a whole new apparatus in my bathroom. This is the way to go, folks. If you've ever been bidet curious, now is your opportunity to resolve those questions once and for all in your life. You try it out. If you don't like it, you can send it back 60 days. Super easy to connect. You can go to hellotushy.com/majority. Get 10% off plus free shipping. This is a special offer for our listeners. Go to hellotushy, TUSHY.com/majority, and you get 10% off right now. hellotushy.com/majority. Check it out. And lastly, Hunt Killer. It's an exciting break from our incredibly relentless stay-at-home routine right now. Hunt to Kill, a murder mystery subscription game. It delivers an immersive experience right to your door. Hunt to Killer brings people together. It challenges them to decode ciphers, examine clues, solve puzzles. Great for date night. Right, Matt?
Indeed.
Do you guys still working on your theater on the...
I'm blanking on the theater now.
Call.
Yeah, yep.
This is... Matt was doing this with his girlfriend. I was doing it with my daughter. It's basically a cold case from like 90 years ago now. A theater back in the 30s. And it's super fun. You get, they send you all sorts of evidence packets every month. Sometimes it's audio, sometimes it's pictures, sometimes you can do the string on the bulletin board with the cue cards and the whole thing. A lot of fun. And the best thing, at least from my perspective, with a 15-year-old kid, they're not on their phone for almost like 90 seconds at a time. It's amazing.
That's something I need to do as well.
Plus, you can join Hunt to Killer's spoiler-free community. Thousands of members online to help each other solve difficult puzzles and talk about true crime. Also, part of the proceeds of every box goes to the Cold Case Foundation, an organization dedicated to helping with real-life cold cases. Look, it's very challenging. I'm not going to lie. It's tough. Sometimes you may need to go and get a couple of clues, but very engaging. And if you can't wait for your next box, you can email them. They'll send it quicker. Right now, you can go to hunttokiller.com/majority. Use the promo code majority. You get 20% off your first box. Use the code majority for a 20% discount. hunttokiller.com. Do you have what it takes to hunt a killer? Check it out. A lot of fun. All right. So let's get back into this. Here we go. So the COVID relief bill, I don't know if we have an update on this, but it appears that it's going to get pushed to Wednesday because they're still working on some amendments in the Senate. More and more, we're getting a sense of what's in this bill. We've, outlined it over the past weeks. And certainly in the Senate, we now know sort of the top line things. People are most, I think, interested in the checks. Again, that's $1,400, cut off at $75,000, and then it diminishes down until your $80,000 annual income. It is 2019 or 2020 is the basis for that cutoff. And so if you had a good 2019 but a bad 2020, you either can file your taxes now, or when you file your taxes, they will kick money back to you after the fact. Just wanted to make that clear. There's also the $300 a month, essentially payments, a little bit more if your child is under 6. If your child is between 6 and 18, you get $300 a month in payments. They call it a refundable tax credit. It's a check.
Yes, it should be called a check. It should be called Biden bucks, as you put it the other day. But of course, the Democrats have to make it a refundable tax credit. Much sexier that way.
Mitt Romney's proposal was to pay it through the Social Security Administration as opposed to the IRS, and it would have sounded better that way. But they didn't do that. Who knows why? Well, I could guess, but who knows why?
But still, overall, very good proposal that's going to have an effect. It's basically UBI if you have kids. And it's, I would imagine, as you've hinted at, very likely to be renewed if the program is a success, if we think it
We hope
it
so.
will be.
1 year, there's certainly support. The Biden administration has signaled its support to extend this and make this permanent. And this would put us, on the lower end, but certainly at least in the same category as virtually every other Western industrialized country in the world. I think in Canada, you get $4,800 a year for a child. If you are a family of four making a combined income of approximately $50,000, you can get up to $20,000 in payments from the U.S. government out of this COVID relief bill. There's also tax breaks associated with unemployment insurance. If you've got unemployment insurance this year, you will have your first 10,000 some odd dollars are going to be 10,200, I think it is, are going to be tax free. In other words, it'll keep a lot of people under in a much lower tax bracket, and that will save a lot of people money who were not anticipating getting taxed on their unemployment insurance. There's an expansion of Obamacare. Nobody involved in the exchanges now will pay more than 8.5% of their annual income.
COBRA subsidies.
There's full COBRA subsidies.
Which all of this is quite, bureaucratic, for the most part. I mean, the direct payments are not, and I think I would argue that the child tax credits aren't. But so this is not a sustainable framework. A lot of this is to address the economic fallout from the pandemic. But it signals that potentially, even though, yes, this is just in crisis mode, maybe they would be open to something more systemic down the line.
Well, and putting aside what they, the politicians are more open to, this is going to essentially train Americans, for lack of a better word, to expect more from their government, as they should. Right now, we have a system where we redistribute wealth upwards. That's simply the case. You look at the benefits that wealthy people get from society, which runs on tax dollars from all Americans, and that wealth is redistributed up. And this is, Americans are going to get a taste, albeit an insufficient one, of what it's like to have the government actually providing for people, particularly in the context of a crisis.
Which is often where these programs are born. Much of our social framework was born out of the Great Depression, and now we're seeing that or social safety net, I should say, even though I don't love that term. And now we're seeing that the Biden administration isn't shying away from that trillion number, and the Republicans have zero pushback on this.
Zero pushback. The CBO estimated that a 64-year-old earning $58,000, according to the Washington Post, CBO estimated that a 64-year-old earning $58,000 would see monthly payments decline from $1,075 under current law, which is just an absurd amount of money to pay for health insurance, but is actually probably less than your average plan can cost you, down to $412 a month. Still more than it should be, and I imagine there's a bunch of co-pays with that, but that's going to make a difference in people's pockets. Another part of this bill is that it rescues union pensions that have been in crisis as well. Reported by the New York Times on March 7th, $86 billion taxpayer bailout for 185 union pension plans. I don't know why they say taxpayer bailout.
Yeah.
This money is being borrowed. We certainly could just write this stuff off if we could, but if we wanted to. But it makes it more dramatic and make it sound like the taxpayers are doing. The government doesn't do anything that can't be defined in that way. Whether it's you never hear the taxpayer funded mortgage interest deduction for people. That you don't hear about. But so the $86 billion will will save about 185 union pension plans that are very close to collapse. It will ensure that more than 1 million retired truck drivers, retired retail clerks, retired builders, others will have retirement income. The bailout targets employer pension plans. And they say that, they phrase it as if it's like, a bailout for union pension plans. Well, these are companies that failed to fund these pensions that they had promised to fund. Employer pension plans that brings together companies with a union to provide guaranteed benefits. All told, 1,400 of the plans cover about 10.7 million active and retired workers. Like I say, in fields like construction or entertainment, where the workers move from job to job. As the workforce ages, an alarming number of the plans are running out of money. Both of these, the House and Senate measures, would give the weakest plans enough money to pay hundreds of thousands of retirees their full pensions for the next 30 years. This provision does not require a payback. So this is going to save the pensions of millions of working class people will be able to live their lives as they anticipated, and as they forego payment in exchange for future payments in the form of pensions that you see companies underfunding all the time, because they essentially will project, like, oh, we're going to make this much money in the stock market, and then they don't, and then that's a problem. There is a debt relief for small farmers, which is going to help, in particular, black farmers who have been systemically deprived of land by the U.S. government. In fact, there was a big...
And we should also say, too, that the child poverty payments are going to disproportionately, in a good way, help Black and Latino families as well. So it's more targeted in that area.
Yep. I mean, this is, it's a good package. We don't have the $15 minimum wage, and it is a huge missed opportunity because this was a must-pass type of bill, and I don't know if the next one will be.
Yeah.
And as a political matter, at the very least, you're not doing $2,000 checks, and you're also eliminating millions of Americans who got a check the first 2 times around and didn't this time. You've expanded how many Americans are eligible because you're covering adult dependents this time around. But in terms of number of families who may be frozen out, you're talking in the millions because of a couple of Democrats who thought that they needed to brand themselves as being not fully on board with everything.
Yeah, that's the most important part, right? Is to make sure Joe Manchin can still appear as the West Virginia version of a maverick to his constituents.
That seems like the most important part to Joe Manchin.
Yes.
And speaking of Joe Manchin, let's talk about H.R. 1, because Joe Manchin yesterday signaled that he had a little bit of wiggle room. I guess it was 2 days ago, a little bit of wiggle room on the filibuster.
In fact, he did a media tour about it, basically. He was on Fox News. He went on Axios on HBO. He was saying this, or at least was asked about it, by multiple outlets, which is interesting.
Well, I mean, I guess it's an inevitable question to ask Joe Manchin, but
right,
you know you're going to get asked it if you go on.
You don't know what comes first, the chicken or the egg. But anyway, Manchin is basking in the glory of his media, the attention that he's getting, and he was asked about it many times.
And he said that he is open to something like a talking filibuster. In other words, the filibuster as it exists now, you need 60 votes to overcome it. Instead of it being 60 votes to overcome, instead of the burden being on the people who want to end the filibuster, the burden would be shifted onto those who want to maintain the filibuster. And in this instance, one of the ideas floated is the talking filibuster. In other words, you need to have a senator stand up there and continue to talk. And as long as they talk, you can't take a vote.
They have to do work then.
Well, they would have to do work, which would eliminate the...
And the work that Manchin here is doing here is that he gets to say, I kept the filibuster without maybe keeping the filibuster. I mean, that's the best case scenario for what we're seeing play out.
And
that would allow voting rights. I mean, they also could ostensibly carve out just an exception for laws involving voting rights.
Well, they could do that as well.
It would be a lot narrower and more difficult, but in terms of, so the best case scenario in terms of filibuster reform for us is just, I would say, eliminating it, but that's not going to happen. But the talking
filibuster is essentially elimination of the filibuster as we know it.
And we don't know where Sinema stands on this. We could end up with a version like I talked about where they carve it out specifically so they can get HR1 or S1 through.
Yes, and we will see. But HR1 is the massive House version of S1, which is essentially a voting rights bill and an anti-corruption bill. The voting rights involve, well, why don't you tell us?
Well, the voting rights are same-day automatic voter registration, which would be massive. Basically, say you want to go to the polls, you want to vote for a candidate, you can register right there and vote for that candidate.
Automatic registration is my understanding as well.
Same day, yes. Restoring franchise for people with criminal records. So, say you committed a felony and you're out of prison, you're going to be able to vote at some point, which isn't the case on the national level. Expansion of early voting, vote by mail, and absentee drop boxes. And this comes on the heels of Georgia doing the exact opposite. Georgia passing a significant voter suppression bill, which basically eliminates no excuse absentee voting. It outlaws it.
1.3 million voters used no excuse absentee balloting in 2020, including 450,000 Republicans.
Right. So this is a very interesting parallel effort that we're seeing here, because in Georgia, they're terrified after what they saw with the Democrats taking both Senate seats and Stacey Abrams and other activist infrastructure being so instrumental in that. And then you have HR1 and S1, the pair bills on the federal level, which would basically very much push back against the continued Republican efforts to suppress the vote throughout the country via state legislatures. I mean, it's amazing to me how I saw in the National Review, they have an op-ed about how this was an assault on our democracy, HR1 and S1. And yet, for years and years, Republicans have been curtailing voting rights. And now that the Democrats are trying to kind of balance the scales on the federal level, they're crying, of course, and saying that basically this is going to lead to widespread fraud, etc. Another good thing about HR1 is it would require super PACs and dark money groups to disclose their donors publicly. Dark money groups do not have the ability or do not have the requirement to reveal the money that they receive or the source of it. And that's actually a lot of what funds certain groups. So you're not able to see to see who funds these dark money groups. And it also has a public funding small dollar matching system, which is one of the really interesting proposals in terms of public financing of elections. And that would be financed by a fee on corporations. So really expansive bill. And this is the kind of substantive legislation that is prevented from being passed by the filibuster. And because it's such a good bill, people like Joe Manchin are facing an enormous amount of pressure to adjust their position.
This also would establish independent commissions to do redistricting. That is something that you could see, frankly, overturned by the Supreme Court. But it is, at one point, you got to try. You got to do it from a federal level. It also would require the president, the vice president, and candidates to disclose income taxes. It would eliminate the use of taxpayer money by members of Congress to settle their employment discrimination suits. It would impose on the Supreme Court of the United States the same ethics that bind lower courts judges. So maybe it might be a problem. Let's say, for instance, if your household income partly comes from an enterprise that has a vested interest in pushing various things up in front of the Supreme Court. We know Ginny Thomas is a huge Republican activist, worked at all sorts of places that are pushing measures that are in front of the Supreme Court all the time. I imagine Clarence Thomas would have voted that way anyways, but it's relatively important for our Supreme Court to at least appear like it is
supreme.
Ethical on some level. This is gonna be a big deal for the filibuster is going to be a big deal, and hopefully HR 1 is the one that breaks that dam. And if it is the case that we get a talking filibuster, it is open season. Yes. And it's going to put a lot of pressure on folks like Manchin and Sinema. We already know that Manchin seems to be largely performative, and so the question is at what point, what edges need to be sanded a little bit.
And let me just quickly list what could be passed with the elimination of the filibuster or the implementation of the talking filibuster. Marijuana legalization, the immigration proposal that Biden had put forward, where over 10 million or 11 million migrants would have a path to citizenship. How about any semblance of gun control? Anything like that? All of these things would become possible.
I got news for you. Joe Manchin not voting for gun control. That's not happening.
Okay, well,
but the PRO Act.
But you could get something like an assault weapons ban, maybe.
It's possible.
You could get something. I'm not talking about an overhaul of our gun laws, but you could get some tweaks where Manchin can posture himself in the middle. Possibly. Again,
I just remember that guy shooting with an AR-15 the cap and trade bill as one of his opening campaign commercials.
And also, the $15 minimum wage would not have to go through the parliamentarian. This could just be an up and down vote.
The White House, speaking of something that could theoretically pass without a filibuster, issued a written statement endorsing the Protecting the Right to Organize Act. This is coming on the heels of Joe Biden giving what union activists, in fact, the union organizer from Bessemer, Alabama, who was here on the program the other day, talking about his experience organizing workers in the Amazon warehouse in Bessemer, Alabama, cited Biden's support as being incredibly helpful. It's lip service, but that helps when you're talking about trying to get people to sign up for a union. The Protecting the Rights to Organize Act is considered one of the most important potential bills for the labor movement in decades.
It would basically end right to work in the over 25 states in this country that have right to work laws.
That means that if your shop turns union, you at the very least are going to be paying agency fees. You're going to get all the benefits of working in a union shop, and you pay your dues to support that.
And Biden coming out publicly about this, I'll just say, I know you're going to get into the details, but this is his statement on the Bessemer unionization fight was the most vocal a president has been in decades in terms of pro-labor. And now he's going a step further by endorsing this PRO Act.
And, it's already passed in the House, or I think it's sure to pass in the House. The question is, will it pass in the Senate? And this is going to, this could push it over the top. It acknowledged, the Office of Management and Budget acknowledged that the PRO Act would protect workers' rights to organize a union and use collective bargaining to fight for better wages and benefits and working conditions. It basically just removes a lot of the obstacles that management uses to keep people from voting for a union or having the opportunity to vote for a union in their workplace. I don't know what you want to talk about, this Nevada thing. but let's briefly talk about it because it's sort of fascinating.
Yeah.
So in Nevada, there has been, since 2016, an internal struggle amongst the Democratic Party there between a progressive faction and a more establishment faction. The establishment faction was built by Harry Reid.
Right. It's still seemingly kind of tied with him as well.
Oh, yeah. No,
Yeah.
I think very much.
Actively
very
so.
much so.
Yeah.
And the progressive faction was associated with Bernie Sanders. They clashed in 2016 a little bit. They clashed in 2020. This fight did not come out in the open. Many of the people in Bernie's campaign, the top members of his campaign, worked on Harry Reid's staff. In fact, in this Intercept piece, it cites Faz Shakir. He is the campaign manager. He worked in Harry Reid's office. Ari Rabenhoff, who also worked in both offices, deputy campaign manager, and National Policy Director Josh Orton, who's no longer with Sanders. He's now in the Labor Department. We should say producer emeritus of the Majority Report. Left here, went to work for Harry Reid, ultimately worked for Bernie Sanders. And that apparently kept the lid on this simmering sort of internal feud. Well, it turns out this past Saturday, the progressive wing of the Nevada Democratic Party won all of the leadership positions in this contested election. And then, and we should say, and this is sort of the funniest part, the progressive wing of the Democratic Party ran under a slate for party leadership known as the Nevada Dems Progressive Slate. The establishment Democratic Party candidates ran on a slate titled the Progressive Unity Slate.
Huh. Very fitting, and we should say that the Nevada Dems progressive slate, very heavy crossover with DSA. Apparently, all but one of the members of this were members of the Democratic Socialists of America. So this schism in Nevada is as indicative of the national progressive versus centrist schism that we're seeing.
I think to a certain extent, and the members of the Progressive Unity Slate, when they lost, apparently had been preparing for this loss, so they moved $450,000 out of the party's coffers and put it into the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee's account. And then, after they lost, the Progressive Unity Slate, they all resigned from the Nevada Democratic Party.
That is not very unifying.
That feels not unify-ish, right?
Yeah, I mean, you had to put your own spin on what I said, but that's fine.
Yeah, I just added to that.
Right, it was
I was
good.
backing you up on that. I was trying to be unified with you in that message.
Well, I'm taking all my money and I'm going home.
That they were not unified.
Actually, I'm going to give it to another program, David Pakman, potentially.
But it's interesting that, I mean, this is a prime example of progressive over a 5-year period, essentially 6-year period, organizing and out-organizing the establishment in this party and taking over the reins of the party. And I would imagine moving it in a more progressive direction. One would have hoped that the Democrats who were in the party before, were in these positions before, would have shown some loyalty to the Democratic Party and the democratic process, small d in the second instance, and stayed and helped. I mean, they put unity in their name.
Well, I mean, but that's the I almost said Orwellian, but I'm going to say it anyway. That's just kind of the Orwellian nature of it, and it's very indicative of the Democratic establishment on the national level, and it goes to show that money is very much involved. The people who are more towards the center have a lot more sway because of the fact that they have the ability to fundraise and have a lot more money at their disposal, and it also goes to show how really two groups on the progressive left have changed the conversation and have done such effective organizing that it's really caused a reckoning in the Democratic Party, and that's Justice Democrats and that's DSA.
Right.
And they deserve enormous amounts of credit because it's not just, voting for specific people, it's organizing and getting the right people on the ballots and on the tickets.
And we should say Justice Democrats, of course, is the organization that has been primarying a lot of Democrats across the country. He supported Jamal Bowman in his win, Cori Bush, I believe, and certainly AOC and others across the country. They are gaining, strength in the Democratic Party.
And something very interesting is happening in Nevada, really. It's just like a contrast between labor and old school Democratic Party politics, and a lot of the young organizers in Nevada are Latino, and are kind of pushing up against the old guard. And so obviously all credit to the organizing efforts in Nevada.
The other area we wanted to talk about, just touch on this story in coming out of Texas with migrant children who are in record number now being detained in a facility meant for adults down in Texas. We're talking about a little over 3,000 children. Now, to be clear, these are children who are legitimately unaccompanied, across the border without their parents. This is as opposed to during the Trump administration, parents would come across with their children. They were then separated, and then they would classify the children as unaccompanied. Yet there is the clear statutory prohibition against keeping these children in a facility like this for more than 3 days. What is supposed to happen, and according to the Department of Homeland Security, is that Health and Human Services is supposed to place these children in some type of foster care, some type of temporary situation. Now, my sense is, and I would take your opinion on this, but my sense is, when you look at what happened with the Berks facility in Pennsylvania, this was a notorious detention center for families in Pennsylvania. That has basically been emptied out. They haven't closed it yet, but there's no one there. My sense is that the Biden administration is in terms of their immigration policy at this point, it is a complete mess. And they haven't been able to execute anything. I think that that there's a lot of mixed messages and poor execution in certain areas. But here's the bottom line. We've got, we're sending a mission to Mars. You can put a rover up there, right? Send us pictures. You can find the relative of these unaccompanied children and send them there. I mean, these children are not walking across the border without the idea that they don't have family members in this country. They do. That's why they're unaccompanied. That's why their parents were okay having them walk across the border, because they knew they had cousins or aunts or uncles or brothers or sisters or grandparents who are living in this country. And it is just a question of how much resources are we going to dedicate to making sure that these children are not kept in a jail.
Meant for adults.
Meant for adults.
I mean, that's what we're seeing. And so there is so much implicit racism in the way a lot of these stories are framed too. And I guarantee in the way that these children are treated by officials, no matter the party that's leading the federal government at the current time. And they don't show deference to these children. I think they treat them, it's much of the, similarly to the same studies that we've seen about how children who aren't white are often assumed to be older. I think they're treated with more barbarity, more callousness. And the Biden administration has been so messy in their response to this. ICE is basically went rogue at the start of Biden's term because he's not shown strong leadership in trying to basically gut these departments that have been shown to be abusive and violating human rights at every turn. There is critique here because if Biden wanted to address this in a more substantive way, he would have abolished ICE, which he was never going to do. And there would be more holistic immigration practices implemented from the top down. And I understand that it's messy, but part of this mess is because he decided to tweak things as opposed to overhaul them.
Right. I mean, go ahead, Matt.
I also want to emphasize, like, to the extent there is a rush now at the start of this Biden administration, we should say it reflects poorly on repressive and, gumming things up at the border itself, right? Like, these are people that may think now that Biden's in, we might have a chance. And hopefully, actually, like Sam said, we actually do change these policies where these kids can go. But this is actually an argument against having a period where you have Trump in, because this is just basically a backlog of people that have been waiting to get in now.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And this is also, look, we're also heading into a season where essentially this trek becomes a lot less becomes less perilous. I don't want to say a lot less for people. So you will always see a surge in the summer. But the Biden administration's got to figure out what their broad policy is going to be. They have a tremendous amount of discretion here. They are court ordered not to keep these kids in there for 3 days. And so they have a lot of leeway
and then again,
to throw resources at it and resolve this.
There's a separate critique, too, about how where are any of the pundits that were as outraged about the child separation, which was a step further in terms of actually kidnapping children. I understand that. But this is also outrageous and not something any civilized country should be doing. Needs to be more aggressively called out by media members. So the hypocrisy is very glaring in that area.
We should just say NBC News had reported supporting what Matt said. Many of the children arriving at the border initially immigrated during the Trump administration were quickly expelled under an order from the Center for Disease Control and Prevention meant to protect immigrants and U.S. residents from COVID-19. There is no reason to believe that these kids were any more subjected to COVID-19 than anybody else, particularly in Texas. Thank you. The Biden administration reversed the policy for unaccompanied children, and that's why they're allowed across the border as opposed to sent back at that time. So at the very least, the whole system is a mess. And there needs to be resources that are applied to this to help these kids. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll just do a little coda on the Lincoln Project. So, viewers of this program will remember that back in, I don't even remember when it was. I know we played it for a best of, but we had Stuart Stevens on. Stuart Stevens, a former Mitt Romney campaign manager, a member of the Lincoln Project, of the members of the Lincoln Project. He had written the book of that was considered the most, I guess, contrite and I had I wouldn't call it a contentious interview. Would you guys call it a contentious interview?
Yeah.
Oh, all right. I guess it was a contentious interview. But at one point, I think I remember saying, so you guys are basically mercenaries. That's what you're telling me. And he said, well, look, if we were mercenaries, we would have gone for the money. We could have made millions of dollars with Donald Trump if we wanted to. And instead, we've done this. Well, it turns out that
a few years later.
Well, except for it was really a couple of weeks later.
Oh, really?
Yeah, no, this is really just more like a couple of months later. Yeah, no, this is according to the New York Times, inside the Lincoln Project secrets, Mr. Schmidt, Steve Schmidt, who incidentally made a ton of cash. I've heard different numbers. Don't know how far it went with Howard Schultz run, who really threatened, perhaps, providing Donald Trump with another term.
And made a ton of cash, basically grifting off of trying to remove himself from picking Sarah Palin and all of the immoral practices there.
Mr. Schmidt and the three other men who started the Lincoln Project, John Weaver, Reed Gallen, and Rick Wilson, had already quietly moved to set themselves up in a new enterprise. This is in the course of raising $87 million. Studies have shown that their work did nothing but...
And went more towards overhead than other similar organizations.
Whoa. I'll tell you where the money went.
Yeah.
Drafting and filing papers to create TLP Media in September and October, records show. September and October. Its aim was to transform the original project, a super PAC, into a far more lucrative venture under their control. This was not the only private financial arrangement among the four men. Shortly after they created the group in late 2019, they agreed to pay themselves millions of dollars in management fees. Three people of the knowledge the deal said. Here's amazing. Over the time, the Lincoln Project directed about $27 million, nearly a third of its total fundraising, to Mr. Gallen's consulting firm from which the four men were paid. I mean, we told you, they're grifters. They're grifters. That is what a grift is. 1/3 of the money paid to four men, $30 million nearly, that was contributed ostensibly to beat Donald Trump. That's all our time for today. We'll leave you on that note. And for those of you sticking around, can you effing believe it?
I absolutely can. I remember calling them out at the time.
No, but I mean, $30 million.
I can believe it.
I knew they were making, I was like, yeah, these guys are making like $2 million each. And now it's literally closer to like $6-7 million each minimum. I mean, imagine what the knock-on effects of this are. My mind is blown, man.
And they just stole from liberals who wanted emotional releases by ads.
We talk about going undercover as a right winger. Maybe for 2024, you go undercover as a centrist liberal, never Trumper.
Yeah. First, you have to be a right winger first.
You have to be a right winger first. I mean, that's
damn
the whole scam, right? I mean, that's the whole scam.
Yeah, you can't take shortcuts in this business, man, of going undercover.
And I'll tell you, my experience at Air America, the first iteration, first year, where, well, not the first year, like the first 6 months, we had so many different owners. There was a guy, and I don't want to say too much because he may be litigious, but I can say this. I know at one point he was arrested in Guam. So, for doing shady stuff. And this dude was pretending that he had a ton of money and that he had raised, and we had checks that bounced. There was early on, thousands of dollars of checks bouncing for Janine and I. And we were both I was coming from show business. I had made a lot of money, and I was like, whatever, it's fine. We were doing it for other reasons. I was like, eventually I'd like to get paid, but I mean, I understand it. I mean, he wasn't saying oh, I'm bouncing the checks because I don't really have the money. He was saying oh, we had a, accounting problem.
Snafu,
yeah, whatever. And at one point, like they're people started getting a little bit upset. Like, hey man, you keep telling you're bouncing checks, and at one point, like he was trying to prove to somebody that he had paid checks, and so he stuffed an envelope full of supposedly receipts and sent one of the guys over to give it to one of the people who were talent there. And they opened up the envelope, and it was just random newspaper clippings. It was like the old, like when I first came to New York, maybe actually this is in the 80s. It was in the 80s. You were walking down the street, and some dude would come up to you and go like, hey man, you want to buy this VCR?
Yeah.
Brand new VCR. And it was wrapped in, like, they would shrink wrap it. And you put your hand in the slot where the VCR is. That was how they proved it was real. And it turned out just to be a box with like a slot, like,
Yeah.
and like waited to, and this was sort of the same scam. But the thing I noticed is that the people working there, the people working under the fraudster, were all sort of yes people. And that's who he surrounded himself with. People who he would just say like, yeah, whatever you want to do, go ahead. He would yes them too, because then they would never question him. And the people who left, like there was a guy who left like within like a week. And I was like, God, what a jerk. Why would you leave this? And of course he didn't want to say anything because he could have gotten in trouble, but it was because he realized there's something seriously wrong here and I don't want to be a part of this.
Yeah.
But that's the sense that you get like at
the Lincoln Project.
At the Lincoln Project.
Yeah.
You get the sense that like, anybody who stuck around in there.
It's a saran wrapped box that's weighted to be a VCR.
And the people who are like, still there are people who sit back and go like, I got one just like this, a guy off the street. It was great. It was a great deal. You should get this VCR.
Yeah.
Man, back in the day, like a VCR, jeez. All right, folks, just a reminder, you can support this program, which incidentally is going to a new thing that we now have, that whenever you support the program, people don't vote for Republicans. So
wow, it works.
Yeah, no, it's like
that?
well, listen. I mean, we're experts at this, and you just gotta trust us. And,
like the stream.
Yeah. And like the stream. Yeah. And when you do that, people don't vote for Republicans. So
Hell yeah,
that's
man.
what happens.
When are you gonna incorporate like the stream into your, rundown routine? Like when's it gonna stick?
6 to 8 months.
Okay,
say.
I'll keep at it.
Also, we have Twitch subs. So
I still don't know how that works.
Did Kyle tell you about this, Sam? How this works?
I haven't quite figured it out yet. I haven't been debriefed yet. But apparently, all I know is that there's some sweet ass emojicons that are associated.
Emojicons.
Yeah.
I don't know
You're
why.
canceled now, Sam.
Full term. That's offensive.
Is that?
No.
Emojicon?
Emoticon.
Oh, emoticon. Yeah, exactly. There you go.
Emojicons sound like some sort of Power Rangers.
We should actually have like one emoticon that is like specifically like one that you like the upper echelon that you can only earn under extreme circumstances, like the full Seder boomer emoticon.
Like when you reach like T14 and
yeah, exactly.
In, Scientology.
Exactly. It's like the most rare of Pokemon cards or something like that.
Mewtwo.
Yeah. I have no idea what you think.
Just
I'm
kidding.
completely lost. It's all the Pokemon.
I don't know all of them. Is that you guys?
I tried to impress a girl in 4th grade by listing out all the Pokemon first 150 in order, sort of so she could see me do it in our little pod, and it didn't really work.
I think that would have worked on me, but I was weird.
So check it out on Twitch. Don't forget, you can become a member at jointhemajorityreport.com, justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code majority, get 10% off. Also, what else we got going? Don't forget AM Quickie, amquickie.com. And on Nomi's show today, I'm not sure who's on. She was feeling ill, so she's not going to join us in the fun half. But I hope that she will have the strength to do her own show. You can check that out at youtube.com/The Nomi Key Show and twitch.tv/The @the_Nomiki_show. Check that out. Also, don't forget, check out Jamie's Antifada. They're Twitch streaming 3 or 4 times a week. Matt, what's happening in the Matt Leckian universe of media?
I'll be guesting on the This Is Revolution podcast's YouTube stream. So This Is Revolution podcast. You can find that on YouTube tonight with Nate Wallace of Red Spin Sports. We're talking about the gentrification of sports, and I'll be talking about how North Dakota played its part in breaking the color line in baseball, which a lot of people don't remember. So tune in for This Is Revolution podcast tonight at 9, I believe it is.
It's 151 Pokemon.
Yeah, well, if you count Mew. But
I'm interested about that North Dakota thing. I had no idea.
Yeah.
All right, folks. 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half. Left is best. Jamie and I may have a disagreement.
Yeah, you can't just say whatever you want about people just because you're rich.
I have an absolute right to mock them on YouTube.
He's up there buggy whipping like he's the boss.
I am not your employer.
You know, I'm tired of the negativity.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to upset you. You're nervous. You're a little bit upset. You're riled up.
Yeah, maybe you should rethink your defense of that, you fucking idiots.
We're just going to get rid of you.
All right.
But dude. You want to smoke this joint?
Yes.
Do you feel like you are a dinosaur?
Some good shit.
Exactly. I'm happy now.
It's a win-win.
It's a win-win-win.
Oh, hell yeah.
Now listen to me. 2, 3, 4, 5 times. 847-906-501-457. 2, 38, 56, 27. 1/2. 5 8s. 3.9 billion.
Wow.
He's the ultimate math nerd.
Don't you see?
Why don't you get a real job instead of spewing vitriol and hatred, you left-wing Limbaugh?
Everybody's taking their dumb juice today.
Come on, Sammy.
Dance, dance, dance.
Rand Paul.
I had my first post-coital scene with a woman. I'm hoping to add more moves to my repertoire. All I have is the dip and the swirl.
Fine, we can double dip.
Yes, this is a perfect moment.
No.
Wait, what?
You make under $1 million a year. You're scum. You're nothing.
Excuse me? Fuck you, you fucking liberal elite. I think you belong in jail.
Thank you for saying that, Sam. You're a horrible, despicable person.
All right, gonna take a quick break. I want to take a moment to talk to some of the libertarians out there. Take whatever vehicle you want to drive to the library. What you're talking about is jibber jabber.
Classic. I'm feeling more chill already.
Good. Donald Trump can kiss all of our asses.
Hey, Sam. Hey, Andy. You guys ready to do some evil?
Hitler was such an idiot.
I think I might be a Nazi.
Agree.
No.
Death to America.
You.
Yes.
Wow.
Wow, that's weird. No way! Unbelievable. This guy's got a really good hook.
Throw our hands up.
Ooh. Wow.
But Sam, I gotta get off.
No worries. Let's. I want to just flesh this out a little bit. I mean, look, it's a free speech issue. If you don't like me,
Hey, shut up.
Thank you for calling into the Majority Report. Sam will be with you shortly.
we're back. I should tell you, I gotta get a. You know what? I gotta upgrade this thing. I gotta get a different sound for this. But what am I gonna do here for this? Well, I'll do one of these. I'm setting off that alarm because we just did a level 5 hype train, and the train has left the station. Hit level 5. So, watch out.
What are you talking about?
Are you serious? I just said we hit a level 5 on the hype train. You don't know what that means?
No, I don't.
Oh, boy. You got to get with it.
To be fair, I barely know what it means, and I'm on Twitch.
I have no idea what it means either.
No, it's not.
Oh, well, I'll explain to you guys afterwards. We'll meet at the commissary. Commissary is so sad now, though, because everybody's in their own little plastic bubbles.
Yeah.
And you got to go in, and it's not the same. Let's go to the phones. Calling from a 314 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, this is Matt. I live in St. Louis, Missouri.
Well, Matt from St. Louis, Missouri, welcome to the program. What's on your mind?
You know, the fight for 15 is on my mind. It was, the last few weeks we saw us basically lose the battle for the fight for 15. And one of the problems with that is I come from a city where in 2017, we tried to raise our minimum wage to $13 an hour, and we were successful. But we have a one-party rule, GOP-dominated state here, and our $13 ballot initiative was just pretty easily reversed by the Republicans that control our state. So they paid zero political price for this. The governor, who's a Trump crony and a clone, he essentially kind of skated into a re-election just a few months ago. So at that time, Sam, I had lost a job, and across the street was a sub shop, and they were hiring delivery guys, So in the past, I had done that before, and when I walked in, I got the job, but it was $3 an hour, and plus tips. So I would basically average like $80 a day before gas. And I worked, I'm an early 40s, like young Gen Xer guy who is a Bernie guy. Cori Bush is my congresswoman. And so I essentially worked with 20-year-olds, and they're very apolitical. They don't pay attention. They don't really listen to political podcasts. And they got paid very low. They averaged about $8 an hour at the sub shop. This is a national franchise. You've probably heard of it. My point is right while I had a kind of an emergency job, a low wage job. I worked with young kids, and in our city, we raised our wages through democracy, essentially. And some of these kids, they actually voted to increase their own wages. They were successful, and it was all set to go. The manager came in. They said, "You're all going to get, at least $13 an hour." The people who drive would go from $3 to $7 an hour, and so then the Republicans come and reverse it. So the end result is a negative lesson learned by the kids who tried to improve their own lives. It was a failed experiment. So then we come to a few years later where, certain parts of the country are pretty desperate for an increase in wages. It's a we can't take no for anything. It's not the era of Joe Manchin and Susan Collins and all these people, those type of politics, Kristen Sinema, that era died in 2016. It really did. When Bernie Sanders ran for president, he only lost Missouri by 1,500 votes. That's it. If you look at the map, there was a certain factor of anti-Hillary thing. I don't want to get off the subject, but if Joe Biden was more aware of this thing, the idea that an entire city it's essentially an economic war. That's what we're in. We're in this economic war where you have towns in the Midwest, like St. Louis. They try to raise their wages very, very cynically and very easily by Republicans who control the state, just take it away. And so, there's a lot of, I currently make less than 15 now. But I get paid. I have a job. I'm doing better than other people. But I think if Joe Biden was more aware of these things, he would be more for an increase in minimum wage. I'll give you another example. When I was in college in 1999, I went downtown and I applied at a warehouse, a national franchise warehouse type supply company that you've probably heard of. At that time, I was unskilled. I didn't have any type of training or a degree. I made $9 an hour, and that was in 1999. And so, you know,
that's just unbelievable, right? Or you compare it like, I don't know that the wages are that dramatically increased, but that's 20 years ago, 22 years ago.
And gas was 90 cents.
Right.
Right? In the late 90s, gas was 90 cents. I was, you know, people like us, my age, we were in college. And so you could pick up, I was a social worker in the late 90s for $8 an hour. And I worked in a warehouse. It was a very difficult job. It was very hot in the summer. And I made $9 an hour. And I felt fortunate that I had made a few dollars more than my peers. But the wages in this particular, in the Midwest, in Missouri, you know, they've gone literally nowhere. And when you hear Senator Thune speak about how he used to make such and such dollars in the 70s, I kind of don't doubt that in a certain way. I don't think he's lying. Maybe he's remembering incorrectly, but
I don't think he's
lying.
No,
he's not lying. He's not lying, but he just doesn't realize that the wage that he made in the 70s is equivalent to over $20 an hour now.
Yeah,
exactly.
They talk about inflation a lot, but he seemed to forget that in that moment.
I mean, you know, it's I don't know. I don't know that it's worth even contemplating, you know, what Joe Biden knows or would do if he knew differently, et cetera, et cetera. I just, you know, I think the bottom line is that, you know, and I imagine right now the people who have been organizing the Fight for 15 for 5 years now, more, are, you know, planning the next phase. Frankly, it's got to be probably more than $15, because I think what's ultimately going to happen, if I had to guess, I would say we're going to see some type of bipartisan, and by that I mean, you know, 6 Republicans will join, will come aboard, and Joe Manchin will come aboard, and Kristen Sinema will come aboard, if it's like $11, right? Minimum wage. And so, and I guess it's also conceivable you might see like $11 minimum wage, but $14 if you're a national corporation or something to that effect, which actually, I mean, if you get 15, I would take tomorrow $15 minimum wage for, you know, national corporations, even franchises, because if, let's say, you know, you're working at a Quiznos and they're paying $15 an hour, it's going to raise pressure on wages across the board. I mean, I would prefer obviously $15, but I have a feeling it's going to end up with like some type of $11.
It could have some effect on small businesses, though.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
I know, but then I don't trust the federal government to retroactively change that in order to. No, it's not a question of retroactive. It's just like, you know, if one sub shop is paying $15 an hour, the rest are going to have to compete. I anticipate that the government would let small businesses die before kind of addressing that and doing another wage bill. Oh, you're saying, okay. No, I'm not saying. I'm saying the opposite. They'd raise it themselves. Yes, okay, exactly. Gotcha. Sorry about that. There would be pressure. But I think like what's going to happen is we're going to end up getting like $11 minimum wage because they're going to, Manchin's going to make some type of deal with Mitt Romney or something to that effect. And the organizing starts, for the $22 minimum wage the next day, it seems to me, because and who knows where it goes from there. But this is, I mean, it's disastrous. I mean, it really is disastrous because, the $15 minimum wage, not only obviously does it raise the wages for people who are making less than $15, but it creates upward pressure on the rest of the wages, which, have been stagnant. So,
I don't know what to tell you.
It's true.
It's horrible.
Yeah, go ahead. Finish.
It's
yeah,
horrible. I just don't know what's...
I will say that, yeah, the true irony is that 86% of Missourians live in a city. 76% of Missourians live in two cities, Kansas City and Missouri. If we increase our wages through tax redistribution, the rural, poor, country, Ozark counties, hours away, get our tax dollars. So we were good to go. We were going to raise our city's wages, and therefore by tax redistribution, counties 2 hours away that are very red, very Trump, and have Republican representatives, they were going to benefit from money. But they were so sadistic in this way, they would rather cut themselves and financially than have that work, than have that be demonstrated that if we raise our wages hours away, you will benefit directly, immediately. Right. And the story of that area of the Ozarks is generations of youth have left. The logging industry cleared out that place before the Depression, and there was no jobs, there was nothing else to do. And for the last 3 or 4 generations, you can't keep people in the countryside. You can't build their economy. You can't grow those towns. Those towns slowly die or never go anywhere or disappear. So, and that's the story of America. Not only is Missouri this structure, Illinois is like this, other states are like this. You have this rural-urban divide, this dynamic that my state is a failed experiment in Republican politics and centrism and democratic centrism.
The problem is that they're not paying a price. They're not paying a price.
My governor, he got reelected.
I don't know what to. I mean, through gerrymandering, our state is a nightmare. Through gerrymandering, how you can have minority rule. I have one-party rule. Quite often Republicans complain about California's one-party rule or New York. It's portrayed in this manner when it really isn't. But I do live in a anti-democratic. I voted to get rid of puppy mills a few years ago. They overturned it. Missouri is the capital of puppy mills. We have unregulated small businesses where if you buy a puppy, 8 out of 10 chances in the 48 states, it came from here, my state, a puppy mill. When you see those commercials for the Humane Society, those horrible things, those are mainly in Missouri. Okay? So the state of Missouri, we voted, this is in the last 5 or 6 years, we voted to regulate puppy mills. They overturned it. We wanted to, a few years ago, draw our maps in a nonpartisan manner, and they overturned it with another type initiative that kind of lied and distorted the facts about that. And then we voted to raise our wages in the city of St. Louis, and they overturned that. So they don't pay a political price because the media is centered in a couple of places, and our administrative capital, Jefferson City, is a place that no one really goes to. There's no media. We don't hear about what happens in the state capitol. And our local television station has grown so much that they try to accommodate like half the state, so half their audience lives several hours away. They don't pay a political price. We don't regulate Facebook. Many Missourians get their news and information from Facebook. And, so I've laid it all out. I thank you for letting me talk about how in my particular neck of the woods, through my real life experience, my wages, when, I've had better jobs, but we've gone through this thing ever since 2008. My generation was younger, more vulnerable to this. And, when you do need fallback type emergency jobs, you do realize the wages haven't gone anywhere. The Joe Manchin politics are dead. They're dead. Well, I agree, but we got to take the next step and make them pay there has to be a political payback. Appreciate the call.
Thank you.
Thanks. Hang in there.
Thank you. Take care.
Hang in there. Somebody just sent me a link. Newsweek polling shows that Manchin's suggestion of an $11 minimum wage more popular with both Republicans and Democrats. And, you know, I mean, I hate to get back on my hobby horse of the book I'm going to write, Blame the Electorate, but there is, and look, there is just overwhelming, hopefully not, but apparently overwhelming, disparity in the, or I should say concentration of the media that, that doesn't create the sense in, the minds of people that $15 minimum wage, no problem. You deserve it. And it's not going to hurt you if you're not making $15 minimum wage, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't know. I really don't know. Frustrating. Call from the 251 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, this is Will from Cincinnati.
Will from Cincinnati. What's on your mind, Will?
Well, I don't know if you guys saw this Daily Beast article yesterday complaining about the online left being dangerously flirtatious with the alt-right, but it was quite a frustrating read, and a lot of Majority Report's friends were mentioned in the article. I'm not sure if you guys saw any of that.
I read some of that.
I didn't see it.
It was meandering. It was. Is this the Daily Beast article?
Yes.
What's very frustrating about it is I got radicalized to the left during the Trump years. 2016, I was just your Democratic Party boy. But because of you guys, because of Chapo, because of Hassan Piker, I definitely have began my journey, discovered the left. Really want to thank you guys for that. And I've been trying to get my friends and my girlfriend to kind of join this journey with me. My girlfriend, however, very specifically, has problems with what she defined as the dirtbag left. And that article does no favors to a lot of people who are progressive or liberal, who are left curious, but not willing to take the step because they associate the far left with racism, sexism, misogyny, etc. And, with someone who's very online like myself and like you guys, this isn't true. And how do we communicate to liberals and, left curious people that may be turned off by this association with racism and sexism that for some reason liberals have associated with the far left online?
Well, I mean, I think that's a lot of it you can explain as a bit of an artificial label. I mean, but they're so for 90% of it, I would say it was used in order to take down Bernie Sanders in 2016 and then stuck, and then unfortunately.
Hey, dude, I gotta let you go. We'll talk about it, but your phone is I don't know where it's like you're in an alien movie or something.
Toilet or something.
Appreciate the call.
My apologies.
That's okay. All right, we'll talk about it. I'm just going over there. I got news for you. Jimmy Dore is not part of the dirtbag.
Yeah.
The article was almost like a bad caller calling into our show, rambling about what they think about watching YouTube for a week, basically.
Yes.
It included people beyond Jimmy Dore. God, I got to go back.
I'm just looking at
it. It's 9,000 pages long.
Yeah, exactly. Jimmy Dore.
Jimmy Dore is not the dirtbag left. I'm sorry. He is not the dirtbag
also,
left.
I didn't even recognize him on the.
Well, it's also like a picture from 40 years ago.
Yeah.
But I don't see who else. I'm quickly.
Well, they
go after TrueAnon and Chapo for some stuff.
Yes, and it's right. The TrueAnon thing was ridiculous, and it started with the Boogaloo Boy critique, so I was fine with that, but to lump him into the you lose me initially because he's not a part of the dirtbag left.
No, not at all. And I guess my
there's a critique to be written about the dirtbag left independent of Jimmy Dore, and maybe it's just kind of why I like those guys, but it's not my favorite media to consume because it's just let's shit all over everything. But it's also that this is not a good critique.
I mean, first off, the idea that, I'll read the thing, but the idea that Chapo flirts with the right is, I think, that is not my sense at all.
Tying this all through the Boogaloo Boy and Jimmy Dore is like kind of ridiculous, just like as a starting premise. Like these are unrelated things.
They're completely unrelated. I would also say that, like, people have asked me, like, why are you more critical of, let's say, Jimmy Dore as opposed to, Chrisman or, just broadly speaking. And
well, they're on the left for.
Well, but from my perspective, Chapo is more of like a culture show. It is more of a comedy show. They may espouse the same things, but there is a fundamental difference between somebody who is out there as a political pundit. And I don't think those guys on that show perceive themselves or interested in themselves as political pundits.
Yeah, reading old Ben Dominic isn't like doing politics.
Right. I mean, it's different. It's a different animal, and it has a different implication, and it has different influence on people, in my perspective. Fran Lebowitz can say something that is like, somewhat similar to what Jimmy Dore says. I mean, I'm sure that there's some overlap there, but they're not having the same type of influence. And
just to address quickly what the caller is saying about the sexism implications too, I think a lot of this is just because there's not enough like women in political leftist media, and so there aren't a lot of. I mean, what Chapo's doing, it's a little more niche and maybe more targeted in some indirect way towards white leftist men, and that's fine. It's just like because there aren't enough women in these spaces to make, I think, the case, and so the message is a little more targeted, but that's not by design. And I think, definitely lumping Chapo in with Jimmy Dore is ridiculous in terms of the article.
Yeah, I don't think the article sort of rewards the amount of time it takes to actually get to the end of it.
I was just gonna say, like, oh gosh,
it was as I said, it was meandering. Yeah.
All right, let's go to the phones. Calling from a 240 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hello, Sam. This is Sammy calling from Baghdad. How are you today, brother?
Calling from Baghdad, Iraq?
Yes, sir.
I'm well. How are you doing?
You're good. How's Sister Emma and the rest?
I'm doing well. How are you? You're good?
You're good.
You already answered that.
Good.
What's on your mind?
I'm calling to talk about Hello Tushy, Glenn Greenwald, and foreign policy. Sorry.
Let's start with the foreign policy.
Can we start with Hello Tushy? Because I know you said you have awkward time promoting it. I want to help you with that.
Okay. Please.
Then I will help. Because Glenn Greenwald to go to Tucker Carlson, and he's best friend with it. And Tucker said that Iraqis are semi-illiterate, primitive monkeys who don't use toilet paper, right?
Right.
Joke on him. We use bidet.
And there you go. Boom. Far more sophisticated way, actually, of...
And you save tons of trees in the process.
Tons of trees.
He wouldn't be on board for that.
And it's also, frankly, I mean, it is much less disgusting of a practice. It is just a cleaner, more hygienic practice.
Exactly. Do you know how I convince my American friends when I talk about the superiority of bidet versus toilet paper? I tell them, if you, with your bare hand, touch something disgusting, let's say feces, for example,
right,
would you rather wash it or wipe it?
Thank you very much. I may
right?
clip this. Yes, no, that's exactly right. You don't just...
You wash it if you have access to it.
Exactly. You don't just wipe it off because you know that it's still there.
So this stupid semi-illiterate primitive monkey, Tucker Carlson, he thought that he was like insulting us by saying that. No, it's just make us cleaner than him and the people who are friends with him.
This is probably
don't go there.
Like the peak Majority Report phone call, I think. This is probably the
Thank you, sir.
This,
Yes.
If we could put this in like a glass case, I would frame it and put it in the office.
Thank you, sir. You made my year. As for like, I don't want to talk about him being involved because it's we talked about him and covered him. I watch a lot of leftist media, and I want to brainstorm something with you philosophically, you, Sister Emma.
Yes.
About how the left perceive being in the Middle East. Because what I noticed is that when we talk about the Middle East, is we start with good intention now. Now, like, let's not bomb, let's not intervene. But, I mean, it's always, like, sometimes I see that it doesn't acknowledge the responsibility of the West in the Middle East.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Because we had a terrible house. We had a house that leaked water. I'm using a metaphor here. Water was leaking. The foundation was not good. Electricity had issues, but Western countries came and set the house on fire. And at some point, we realized here, fire is good. Let's get the hell out of there. You know what I'm saying? So it's just to say that, it's quite a mess there, and we made things worse there. It doesn't, let's say, you have more job to do there.
Yes.
That's just from an ethical responsibility standpoint on. And sometimes, unfortunately, it will include bombing. Why? Do you know why? Because these interventions created the conditions for the emergence of militant groups that we don't have the ability to face by ourselves. Like ISIS, like the militias in Iraq now, like the ISIS, the Sunni groups, and the Shia, like the Iran-backed groups, we don't have the ability to face it. And these groups were, in one way or another, the function of the Western intervention in our region.
Well,
you know what I'm saying? So
So are you kind of critiquing some of the leftist discourse that just says, we got to get out, we got to get out, we got to get out, without kind of addressing the conditions that, because I think that's way more of what Tucker Carlson, to bring it back to, his...
No.
That's more of what Tucker Carlson's talking about in some ways.
No, Tucker says let's not be there because these monkeys are not worthy of our tax money.
Right.
Let's spending elsewhere.
But Sammy, here's the dilemma. Here's the dilemma, okay?
Yeah.
For people who are going to be, sort of like from a leftist perspective, but just from merely a thoughtful perspective. Because, we leveled Afghanistan. We completely, look, and this goes back. We're back in Balfour Declaration. We're over 100 years, well over 100 years in the making of these things. Here's the problem. Here's the dilemma. Right? Is that we absolutely in the West, not just America, Britain, France in particular, Italy,
exactly, and that's
countries.
why I didn't say just America,
right,
because it started with Balfour and the colonialism.
Without a doubt. Mm-hmm. Here's the dilemma: is that we don't have. If I thought, look, and this is why, frankly, I supported the intervention in Libya, at least as far as the UN mandate was, because, we had a situation where, and this is not exactly analogous, but, there was a threat of genocide in Benghazi by Gaddafi, and I felt as an internationalist on some level that I want to support the UN in its, sort of the only mechanism in which we can determine that there may be a legitimate threat of genocide. But the problem is we just blew through the mandate, and that was just like it was clear in retrospect, it was just a pretense. And maybe for some people it was clear in terms of looking ahead as well. But there is to trust that the West will do the right thing or will engage in a way that actually provides reparations in some fashion or responsibility for what they broke. The problem is that that never happens. Like I mean, there was a responsibility, an American responsibility, to deal with ISIS because we created ISIS more or less. But the problem is that like, it doesn't stop there, right? It's just sort of the cycle. At one point, like it's a self-licking ice cream cone. It's like we create. It's also sort of almost like the formula for neoliberalism, like actual neoliberalism, which is like the market creates the problem and then the market will solve the problem. And then it creates other problems and then the market will solve that again. I mean, that's what keeps happening in this cycle of intervention, is that we create a problem, then we justify our continued intervention to solve the problem that we create. And in the course of solving that problem, create another problem that justifies our intervention to stay and solve that problem. And it just keeps going on and on. And
yeah, but brother,
go ahead.
Sorry.
No,
yeah,
go
but
ahead.
The Hydra is keep getting bigger and it's adding more heads every time. And if the locals and if us couldn't face the first mini Hydra, it goes without question that we cannot face the new Hydra with the 500 heads. You know what I'm saying? And it's after all, and that's why I address people like you, because I know, and not Tucker Carlson, because you are responsible and ethical, and you acknowledge the role of the West in feeding and irrigating this Hydra. I mean, I know what you're saying is absolutely right, but it doesn't take away the responsibility.
I agree.
I don't know what they need to do. They need to be more creative, reach out and do things differently. It's on them. You know what I'm saying? But just to recognize, Hydras are ugly, and it seems that every time we cut a head, it adds 3 heads. So maybe we just leave this town, leave the villagers with the Hydra, and they will deal with it because we made things worse for them.
Well, that's my fear. Is that you got a 50-headed Hydra now, and I'm convinced that when we're done, you're going to have a 150 headed Hydra. Like every time that everything we touch turns to shit. when it comes to this military intervention,
have the ability to fix. Yeah. Anyway, and again, this is not a critique towards you, because you, at least, you were not supportive of the war at the beginning. And you, when you cover like our region, you show humility and say, I don't know. But sometimes I see voices on the left that they talk with absolute language and they don't touch the surface. And it lacks nuance when it comes, and the world is black and white to them.
And it lacks the practicality of what you're dealing with, right? Which is, the left is able in the United States to talk about these issues, I guess, from a kind of an ivory tower as opposed to.
And not even an ivory tower, just like we're just in any tower. We're just not having to live it.
Right. And to be honest, most of the time it's driven by feeling good about themselves.
Yeah, well, there's American exceptionalist critique baked into even some anti-interventionist commentary on the left too, but we try to steer away from that.
Yeah, and I appreciate what you do, and thank you so much for taking my call, and I love you guys, and you take care of yourself, okay?
Thank you, Sammy. I appreciate it. It was a great call.
Thank you.
I mean, it really is a tremendous dilemma, because I don't know what the creative solution to that is. And even if one could develop it, if it involves, would it be executed by this government? I mean, this is really, the sort of, in my mind, the sort of the challenge of the non-interventionist position is just sort of like that. It is easy to say like, oh, all right, I went into the store and I broke everything. And then you come out and you go like, but I realize I've learned my lesson. I'm not going back into the store. But wait a second. All the shit's on the ground.
Yeah.
It's all broken. Who's going to sweep this up? And the problem is that like, you can't trust me to sweep it up, but somebody's got to sweep it up. And you can't put a broom in my hand because all I do with a broom in my hand is smash other shit in the store. I mean, it's
Because you are, say, like a robot that only knows how to use a hammer, for example, and the solution can't be more hammers. It has to be somebody who knows how to operate a broom, to take your metaphor to, even more convoluted areas.
Thank you. Well, I mean, I don't know how you get much more convoluted than I was already, but yes, I mean, that's the dilemma. And the important thing, I think, is like, it starts, I mean, I think it was well said when you said, like, it reflects an American exceptionalism or some form of exceptionalism that is stated by the left, which is like, it's conceivable.
And it's not all left. I'm just,
No.
some of the arguments that I've heard. I mean, it's not most of the left either.
Right. It's strains, whatever. I mean, it's like it exists. We don't even have to necessarily quantify it to know that it exists, and it's not insubstantial. It's greater than zero, and it certainly drives some commentary. But it is. I am, and part of the reason why I am always hesitant to talk about not so much foreign policy, but foreign politics that are taking place, is because I don't know that I trust my perspective. Like, I have enough doubt about my perspective of this country. Never mind a country that, I haven't lived in for an extended period of time. I think there are times where it's hugely presumptive. Now, with that said, I'm not saying that we shouldn't do a better job in covering these things, because there are voices that we can find, but it's like, you really need to be, one of the things that I think, Michael had was that many people don't, I think, remember or acknowledge, wasn't even, his interest in foreign policy predated his, where he was in terms of his evolution, in terms of his politics. I mean, he was always interested and steeped in foreign policy, and developments in other countries that predated much of his sort of like more ideological perspectives on these things.
Yeah, I mean, he studied in Turkey, right? And it was, I mean, that's what people talk about Michael as if it was just his big brain, but it was really the amount of time he'd spent building up a fluency in these countries.
Oh, yeah. I mean, people don't, first off, he was only going to be on the show for a year, and then he was going to go study at the LSE. And early on in his time on this show, he hosted a show, I can't remember the name of it, Misdirected? I can't remember what the name of it was. But with for Reza Aslan's media company. And it was all, talking to foreign policy people. And that's, that you steep yourself in that and you learn. It's not just a question of like it's that you have a concentration in and talking to these people. I mean, I just did what we were referring to today. I can't even remember what it was. My brain's so fried. But I'm interviewing right now for a second hour for Peacock that is just going to live on Peacock, two people a day. And I can speak now very knowledgeably about this major oil spill in North Carolina, for instance. It's not because I'm a genius, it's because I just spent a half an hour interviewing a guy who's been reporting on it.
Yeah.
So a certain amount of humility. I get very, very, hesitant to make proclamations about politics in other countries because I just don't have the time to make myself an expert on it. And, but we can do a better job, at least on this show, of bringing people on. But nevertheless, you got to give some deference to people who are actually on the ground living the experience. And particularly when you talk about Iraq, in my mind, that, the influence that we've had over Sammy's life with our tax dollars, because we blew the shit up out of his country, at the very least, at that point, you owe that a certain amount of deference. Just, just to be polite. Sorry, we completely created, 2 million refugees, internal refugees, 2 million, external, killed, anywhere from several 100,000 to 1 million people in your country. Sorry about that. It's. Anyways.
It's like we should try to figure out a way to help without guns or profit to ourselves, I think.
I mean, if it was up to me,
without profit,
the amount of money.
Fuck off.
Yeah, what are you talking about, Matt? Jesus. We should be dumping. We should here's the creative way that I would do it. That $770 billion budget we have annually. How about this? $350 billion of that we take day one. We just sort of ease things out because I understand we got bases, in this country that the economy deals on. We just turn them into U.S. aid things. We'll take whatever percentage of the military that we can, personnel who we don't think are, super psyched to kill people. And we put a new patch on their uniform, and their job is figure out how to build bridges or how to develop irrigation systems or how to beat traffic.
Channel that American exceptionalist impulse into something slightly more constructive.
Yeah, I mean, maybe, here's whatever it is. We figure out what they need, we make it, and we bring it to them. Or, we bring them cash and do it. But again, I don't know. It depends on who's dispensing the cash as to whether I would trust, are doing that as well, frankly. And invariably, then the CIA ends up running the whole operation and it just becomes the same fucking thing. Here's H.R. 1. Let's hear Sean Hannity. Talk about H.R. 1. These are provisions that, provide for no excuse absentee, same-day registration, automatic registration. It would allow early voting. It would
expand it, vote by mail, absentee drop boxes, dark money, financial disclosures.
It would have independent commissions do redistricting. It would standardize the voting process. You may remember Sean Hannity was promoting the 80 different court cases around the country.
He's very concerned about voter fraud.
He's very concerned about voter fraud, but doesn't want to anyway codify any of these things. I mean, if you listen to Sean Hannity, well, let's listen to Sean Hannity right now.
If you do.
For absentee ballots, I mean, it's basically it is a wish list for how to be able to cheat in future elections. Yes, cheat. They have no checks and balances. Now, if you want to go see your Capitol and you want to get in, you need a photo ID. You want to go to a Democratic National Convention, you need a photo ID. Prevents election officials from removing even ineligible voters from the voting rolls or confirming eligibility and qualifications of voters. I mean, it would ban all state voter ID laws. You talk about brazen. I mean, this is just, man, let's institutionalize the easiest way to cheat in elections. It ensures illegal immigrants can vote because it would shield non-citizens from prosecution if they are registered to vote automatically. Agencies would not be required to keep records of who declined to affirm their citizenship. Allows same-day voter registration. How are you going to have a background check there? Requires registration for those under 18 and states to carry out a plan to increase, people. What are we going to have? 15-year-olds voting next?
No.
What's the legal drinking age? Prohibits the publication of misleading information about elections, a federal crime to communicate or cause to be communicated information that is knowingly false. Well, that could affect them because every 2 years they say that Republicans are racist, sexist, homophobic, xenophobic, Islamophobic, now transphobic, want dirty air, water, and want to kill grandma. That might apply to them. Felons vote. They're going to mandate early voting. What the problem with early voting is that the campaign's not over yet. There could be with a weekend before election Tuesday, maybe you discover a DUI or some other criminal record that had been hidden. That actually happened in 2000, in case you don't remember.
Who cares?
Unbelievable.
Well, wait a second. Maybe we should never have a voting day. Because what if something came out the day after the voting day?
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, he's arguing we can't have early voting because if you do, what if something comes out the day before election day and people have already voted? In that, to use that logic, we should never actually take the vote.
Yeah, or just voting every single day on everything.
Just keep voting in case something else comes out the next day. Here's the thing, is that this voter ID is just one of the most sort of relentless lies that exist out there. The reason why you give your ID to when you go into the Capitol, for instance, it's because that way they can assure that if you do something, you cannot pretend it was somebody else who did it.
Right.
It is not because you have been allowed a position, an opportunity to go into the Capitol that day. You have a reservation, let's say, or a registration, and they're afraid that somebody else is stealing your reservation or registration. Because for that other person to know that you had a registration or a reservation at the Capitol that day and then go in and pretend that they were you would be absurd.
And there's no financial benefit in that area at all.
Well,
or
there's
real
no
benefit
reason
at all.
to do it.
Yes.
Because you could just go and register to go into the Capitol yourself. It's not like it's limited to someone else. And the fact is that if everyone is registered to vote, you'd have to go back twice, pretend one time you were one person, and then go back and pretend you were another person the second time. And I guess you could go from polling place to polling place so you wouldn't see the same people on that day.
Well, you need a fake mustache for one, a monocle for the other, Groucho glasses for the next.
And this
multiple
sounds
wigs.
absurd because it is absurd. And that is why there is no incidence of this happening in any meaningful way. But there's this game that they play. And, I don't know. Maybe it's not even relevant anymore. Like, it's just a question of, do you get rid of the filibuster and just do this because you're done playing this stupid game of pretending that they have a legitimate argument when everyone knows they are looking to suppress the vote. Everyone knows this.
I would be done with it. And I think that partly that's what you are seeing from some of the Democrats, too. Okay. Donald Trump, with his voter fraud obsession and his claims that he actually won the election, again, I can't stress it enough. The media is still feeling the aftershocks of that, and they are not giving credence to these claims like they normally would have about voter ID.
That's why it's got to happen quick.
It's got to be quick.
Got to be quick.
Got to be quick, Martha. And that's why we're seeing immediately after the Senate agrees on this COVID relief package that, okay, you hear things about S1, HR1. This could be incredibly important because the Republicans have swung the pendulum so far to the right and have done it so thoroughly in state legislatures with voter ID laws and voter suppression that the only way this can be addressed, and the only way that, hey, Democrats, I'm appealing to your sense of wanting to win and your political careerism, the only way that you're going to be able to keep holding office is if this is standardized on the federal level, and this is a very good bill, and it can only be passed if the filibuster is at the very least tweaked. So I'm glad Manchin is feeling the pressure on this, and I'm glad that this is one of the priorities that we're seeing. Next up, $15 minimum wage. Next up, many, many things, hopefully, that we can get through the filibuster if there's reform in place.
Here's Tucker Carlson on his humanitarian concern for Americans who are dealing with immigration. And then he also throws it in, pretends that there's some humanitarian concern that he feels for the unaccompanied minors who are in this essentially adult jail down in Texas because it suits him to talk about hypocrisy.
Right.
Case in point is the total number of illegal immigrants living in the United States. It's been 11 million officially for decades. Everybody repeats that. They keep repeating that number, even when all available evidence contradicted that number. That number is a complete lie. There is some research out there, some good research, totally nonpartisan. And the best research suggests that there are at least twice that number of people living here illegally, and possibly many more, quite possibly more than 30 million. But journalists and the politicians they protect don't get to the bottom of it because it doesn't bother them. Because they're all part of one class. They're the professional class. They run the Democratic Party, and more illegal immigration means cheaper low-end labor for them. It doesn't really matter what effect it has on the country. It doesn't really matter what more crowding does to the natural environment. We've got about 100 million more people living in the United States than we had 30 years ago. What does that do to the environment? No one cares. Who does it hurt? They don't care. Of course, if you are being hurt, you do care. If you're living in poverty in the Rio Grande Valley, none of this is an abstraction. The actual numbers matter very much to you. Fox's Casey Harrell recently did what most journalists are refusing to do. He went down to the border to try to understand, on foot, with a camera, the scope of the illegal immigration surge that has intensified since Joe Biden became president.
The wave of migrants currently flooding America.
You fast forward,
which translates into a shortage of detention beds and space, even as additional temporary overflow facilities are brought online.
This is obviously a humanitarian crisis, mostly for Americans, but not just for Americans, for the migrants themselves.
Oh!
Whatever happened to those kids in cages? All those unaccompanied minors? Maybe some of them don't have their parents with them. Nobody cares anymore. It's hypocrisy, yes, but it's so in your face, you have to conclude the hypocrisy itself is the point. They humiliate you and wear you down by ignoring their own previous statements and blowing right past you with their new agenda. As Congressman Cuellar pointed out, all of this is intentional, from the way they're hiding the data to the complete 180 on the child overflow facilities. The people living in Starr and Zapata counties voted the way they did for a reason. Is it surprising to you that they're being punished for it now?
Okay. That's what he's concluded, is that the hypocrisy is the only story. He throws a little bit of lip service, right? It's the same argument that the people who want to uphold slavery implemented, right? That actually slavery was benevolent towards black people. It's the same thing that he's using there. Yeah, our crackdown on immigration is actually very beneficial for the migrants because we're preventing them from being in an overcrowded space. I mean, we don't want to be overrun by these migrants as much as they don't want to overrun us because, you know, obviously that would be mixing. But again, he's concluded that the hypocrisy is the main story here. There's no political underpinning to what he's talking about. There's no critique but there's no policy critique that he's trying to bring it back to. It's about the hypocrisy of the Democrats.
Oh, I don't know about that. He is walking right up to the line, if not crossing it, with this eco-fascism. This notion that we don't have. I mean, when he starts talking about like we don't have the room for these people in this country because we have resources and it's hurting our environment, he is now like that El Paso shooter. And I mean, that was
what Naomi Klein talked about us with.
Exactly. I mean, this he's walking right up to the line of the eco-fascism. The only thing I would give him some credit is that like there needs to be more attention on these kids who are being held in this facility. No doubt. A big part of it, of course, though, we've already stated, and we said in the first half of the show, is a function of unaccompanied. And he's also trying to conflate what happened with the unaccompanied children. These are legitimately unaccompanied children who were sent across the border. They were sent back because of COVID in some instances during the Trump administration. They're now being accepted into the country. They're not able to process them quick enough in this country, and they need to put more resources to getting them with their families. But be clear here. When the Trump administration kidnapped children, they had come across the border with the parents. They separated them from the parents and then said, now they're unaccompanied children. That's not what they changed the definition of that term so they could take these children away from the parents as opposed to actually legitimately being unaccompanied. But he doesn't give an ass about any of that. This is full on eco-fascism.
Yeah, well, he referenced poverty in the Rio Grande or whatever. This fundamental lie that there's enough opportunity around, there's just too many competitors getting in somehow.
Well, that's socialism.
How is it the case
apparently
that the impact of these undocumented immigrants is so heinous on Americans that we don't even notice there's twice as many, 3 times as many as we think there are, according to him?
Yeah, well, you don't notice it, but of course the real Americans notice it.
Oh, I guess that's true.
And they're taking away opportunities from Americans with the cheap labor they offer the professional class as well.
We were until COVID. We were on the path of not quite there, but we were on the path to full employment. The issue is about stagnant wages and raising the minimum wage. But that's Tucker Carlson for today, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, are they doing this with Deb Haaland now too?
Yeah, you spoke too soon.
I spoke too soon. Here's Tucker Carlson really concerned about the racial purity of Deb Haaland.
So that's who Deb Haaland is. She's a person of color. The most important thing about Deb Haaland is her ethnicity. That's the unanimous message from our professional class. But since we're playing identity politics here, which obviously...
Professional class.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Disgusting. We wish we weren't. Identity politics
Socialism with
stupid
Tucker.
and immoral. But since we are, it's fair to ask a few more questions. Deb Haaland identifies as a Native American. On the other hand, Haaland sounds very much like a Scandinavian name, and that stuck out to some of us who have Scandinavian names. So what's going on here? Well, in fact, Deb Haaland is every bit as much Scandinavian as she is American Indian. Her father was Norwegian. And that means, in addition to everything else, Deb Haaland is America's first Norwegian-American Interior Secretary since Thomas Kleppe served in the Ford administration almost 50 years ago. In their quiet, brooding way, the Scandinavian community, we can tell you, is beaming with pride. Finally, one of ours has made it. Little girls with names like Larson and Hansen and Dahl will watch cabinet meetings on C-SPAN and know that they, too, have a chance to oversee 1/5 of the American landmass someday. When Deb Haaland speaks, she'll be speaking for millions of Norwegian Americans, people whose ancestors have been here in the Americas for more than 1,000 years.
Not
Their voices
indigenous
can
to
now be
here, though.
heard. Deb Haaland, hero to the Nordic people. She's welcome in our sauna anytime.
Oh, is he? Okay, Carlson, I forgot. Yeah. Well, I can speak as a Norwegian. I don't accept Deb Haaland as a Norwegian. So sorry.
The idea that there is no relevance to a woman with indigenous ancestry.
Yeah, I mean, it's just...
To take the position of the Department of Interior. I mean, it's just... this is like full-on desperation time now for Tucker Carlson, and he is adopting the language, right? Like he's adopting the PMC language, the professional class. He's
the second time he said
one
it.
of his little sort of fascist forum writers are adopting some of the sort of like the shading of the language of the socialist left, yes, because that way, I mean, he and Greenwald can go around and say that he's a socialist, and he can cite the fact that he's talking about
class politics. Why are you mad that he's doing class politics for?
He's saying professional. He's saying professional class.
Yeah, it's obscuring owner.
Exactly. I mean, it really is just fascinating. It's just fascinating. This guy with 3 homes and an heiress, an heir. I mean, this guy is such a charlatan. It's unbelievable. Super dangerous in that respect, too.
And the use of the professional managerial class moniker basically also just obscures the Democratic Party often serves that section, but the Republican Party purely serves CEOs and the owners. and yet there's it's never discussed there. It's always just the the management types. They're the ones that just solely direct your ire towards, and I'll co-opt that language myself.
Let me just say, like, also tribal affiliation is not genetic, as we've had to go over a number of times in democratic politics. And also, if Deb Haaland doesn't operate in a way like I don't think Tucker's going to be holding her feet to the fire if she doesn't. Let's say if she just does more of the same at the Department of Interior, and I'm hoping that she doesn't. So.
Well, Tucker declared himself to be Norwegian there. I mean, does he have any other bloodlines in his pure Aryan blood? Because I don't know if he could accurately describe himself as sufficiently Nordic based on those facts. We just don't know, right? So if he's not 100% Norwegian, I don't know if he can claim that he is. Yeah, I need a birth certificate or a blood test. I need Tucker's 23andMe.
This is a fun clip. Brian Kilmeade finding out that teachers are not making a ton of cash. He's got to come up with something else. Anybody who has been particularly in this context, right, where you get to you have the opportunity to see sometimes the teachers interact with the children because they're on Zoom. Here is Brian Kilmeade trying to come up with scramble around as to why we woefully underpay. We put so much in this country. We impose so many requirements on what education is supposed to deliver in this country. And then we basically say to the people who are primarily responsible for providing that education, yeah, we don't value that much.
I feel sorry for the teachers because they don't get paid a lot. My sister's a teacher. They don't get paid a lot. A lot of times they're spending their own money to buy supplies for the classroom. But we heard one mom say when we did our panels, our conversations with parents, we heard one mom say that her teacher said, I love the Zoom because I get to go work out and I don't have to take a shower before I get on Zoom to teach the kids.
Right. Well, the CDC said the teachers can go back without being vaccinated, exactly. And that flies in the face of what this UTLA is.
Don't let that.
Pause it. Let me just say this. The story of one teacher who's like, I don't have to take a shower because, after I work out because of Zoom. Nobody says anything but if there is proper ventilation and there is proper distancing and there is proper mask wearing, it is safe to go back to school. The problem is there's no money for the proper ventilation. There's no resources to make sure that there's proper distancing. None of that exists. And you never hear the if. That's always just brought in after the fact. All right, but go back because Brian Kilmeade, how is he going to deal with the fact that there's actually somebody there who knows a teacher and knows how woefully underpaid they are and how undersupplied they are, so much so that they actually have to pay for their own supplies to teach the kids. So he's got to come up with something quick.
Vaccinated, exactly. And that flies in the face of what this UTLA is.
Don't let that bother you. Plus, they get 3 months off in the summer. They get tenure. It's almost impossible to get them fired. As we're seeing now, you have union protection. So there's a lot of positive things to being a teacher in Los Angeles, maybe more than most cities.
Yeah.
Oh.
He's got to say that because his co-host has a sister who's a teacher and knows everything he's saying is bullshit. There is no tenure. There's just a protection from the politics that goes on with basically with principals who want to create their own, naturally in any type of fiefdom. They get the same type of, make sure they get the same type of protections that you get at your job, Brian. And the idea that they get the 2 or 3 months off, they're working on creating plans, but also their job doesn't end when they leave the schools. They're correcting papers all night. They're coming up with plans. They're
coming up with plans over the summer. Just because their job changes over the summer doesn't mean they're just sipping pina coladas. And he can't even use and what are they paid to do excuse there because he realizes in real time that they are not paid well.
Exactly.
And how do you work in political media and not know that teachers are paid poorly? That's just how insulated and culturally focused they are in specific
He
things.
knows. He just doesn't want it to be actually advertised.
And he couldn't retrofit it into his argument in real time at that moment. So,
Exactly.
yeah.
Folks, we're not going to have time for any more calls. I don't want you to hang on for the next 10 minutes because we're just not going to have time. I'm sorry. I got to figure out something about that with the calls. This was pretty impressive. Papa John has been spending 20 months. The guy from the ex-CEO from Papa John.
Yeah.
He's been engaged in a 20-month-long project, folks. This is tricky. Got to hand it to him. Sticking to it. What is it? What is it? How long would it take you? What could you dedicate 20 months to?
Is it a new recipe?
It could be a new recipe. It could be. Has he be trying to drop? Like, I don't know. Like sometimes, like if you have to lose a real ton of weight, it's a long-term project. You don't want to do it too quickly. Maybe it's or it could be training for like a marathon or something, right?
I'm hoping it's a Papa John novel.
Or he could be working on a novel. Let's tune in and see. He was on One American Network. Let's see what he's been working on for 20 months.
Take me back to a few years ago when you start to see these headlines coming out and smearing your You start to see these headlines coming out and smearing your good name. How did you feel at the time when you were seeing these headlines?
State of shock. Unbelievable. I couldn't understand it. I mean, again, you have a public board that paints its chairman complicit, passive, or active. They paint the founder as a racist. They know he's not a racist. It's just unbelievable. And I used to lay in bed just going, how did they do this? And we've had 3 goals for the last 20 months to get rid of this N-word in my vocabulary and dictionary and everything else because it's just not true. Figure out how they did this and get on with my life. If Papa John's would just say, hey, we got in a hurry, we didn't follow proper.
Yeah, well, Brandon, do you have that photo of him working on his vocabulary?
He has spent 20 months trying to get rid of it from his dictionary, from his...
Here he is. It was a few years ago.
There you go.
I love that photo of him drunk.
He's got to spend 20 months working on getting it out of his vocabulary, of his dictionary, and then to convince people that I'm not racist at all.
Yeah, well...
How did they do it? How could they have done this to me?
He needed a 20-month detox program for the N-word. That was the drug of his, of choice. And then, after saying so, then tried to convince the world that he never used it in the first place. Seems like you still might be on the sauce. That being racism.
That's quite a project. That's quite a project.
Also, look at that kitchen behind him in that interview on OAN. Doesn't seem like he's in dire financial straits.
He got completely kicked.
His house.
You should look up his house. Yeah.
Yeah, it is so damn funny. He's got a giant eagle sculpture that rotates over the course of the day as a clock.
An eagle sculpture, because
if memory serves, I can't remember.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm surprised it's not a rotating pizza oven in the middle.
All right, let's go through some IMs. 20 months. God knows what I could do with 20 months.
What could you do?
I could probably lose my habit of going I
was just going to say, if only you worked so hard at getting ums and ahs out of your...
No kidding, right? I feel like I could do that in 3 months. Take 3 months off. All I'm doing every day, training to not use ums or ahs or to...
And at the end you say, I never said or ah before in my life.
Yeah, and I would spend 3 months, 5 hours a day, 6 hours a day to get rid of the and ahs, and then at the end of it, I would go. First off, I've been spending 5 or 6 hours a day for 3 months to rid myself of that habit of saying and ah,
which I never had.
And then I'm also next on my agenda is trying to figure out why people said I ever said that.
Okay.
Okay, why did people say that I did and ah in the first place? That's the other thing. That's number 2, what I'm trying to figure out. And number 3 is basically, how did any of this happen? I have no idea how I'm here. So, upheaval.
I'm sorry, I didn't know what that was. That's an IM.
Apinva. Apinva. That Newsweek article is bull crap narrative building. The poll cited has $15 at 60% support and $11 at 70% support. Picture the Venn diagram of those percentages.
I would imagine it's a lot more complicated where people, they hear 15 there and they hear it's 725 now, and then people go, oh, why don't we just compromise, do in the middle? I mean, that's a lot of the way people think, I think.
Mutts butts regarding Tucker's COVID spliff. Sam, think of how many lives could have been saved if we had adhered to safety measures as a nation. Conversely, think of how many lives were saved by those of us that practice COVID safety measures. Without a doubt. Sad man. Hey, Sam, I know you used to have a sponsor named BetterHelp, but it seems that that it was some kind of scam. They didn't check if the therapists were licensed. That is not what I read up on that. And they are still our sponsor. I read up on that. And I think initially, that's not my understanding as of now. Hello, Sam. How many of your live streams get monetized, really considering the topics you're often discussing? Not all of them. I don't know. I mean, I got to be honest with you. I don't sit down with a spreadsheet. I don't spend that much time thinking about it. I mean, sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they come back and they say you're not monetized, and then all of a sudden they do a check and you are monetized, and so I don't know.
That's my job. That's what I'm primarily responsible for.
Is that right?
Here. No.
Oh. It's like, wait, are you doing that? I was wondering how that happens. Joe Manchin's safe word. That Nevada story is wild. Crying crocodile tears about unity and vote blue no matter who, and then quitting when you lose. Yeah, it's unbelievable. Looks like the Democratic Socialists beat the Democratic Sociopaths. Right-wing Mandela. Some positive news. I'm a teacher and got the Johnson & Johnson shot this weekend. Also, the offer my wife and I put in on our first house was accepted. Plus my 30th birthday. Can I get shofar? Yes, you can.
Wow.
Comrade Mario, Iraqi caller is the best caller ever. Sincere thank you for connecting us to an international community. Yeah, that was fantastic. Libertarian Recovery, the NDAA is just a taxpayer-funded bailout of the Defense Department. Indeed. Zopunny, if we can get that talking filibuster, great. Most of these people over 70 start to lose steam after a couple hours. Indeed. Be like Mike. Kentucky is attempting to criminalize insulting the police. Oh, jeez. HR Data Monkey, just like my boomer dad, Sam is saving his old iPhones to use as his YouTube streaming camera. Wait, what? Is that a problem with that? What's wrong with that? PCT Joe, I like the filibuster as a mechanism to extend debate so long as it cannot end a vote. Making them talk for it is not a bad idea, but it might be good to add a time limit. No, let them talk. They're going to run out of steam. Matt, what are some good resources to give people to explain why the deficit doesn't necessarily matter right now? They're not asking Matt. That's the name of the person. Just about any economist who writes about anything. I mean, when you're going through a crisis, but the best person would be like anything. Google Stephanie Kelton about deficits. Stephanie Kelton. All else. So I see that you have a sub button on Twitch now. Are we going to start seeing any Twitch exclusive content, even if it's just Matt playing NBA 2K21 or something? Eventually, we'll get there. Mike Pesca, can we talk about how I got canceled from Slate? I don't know that whole story. I did hear that he got fired or suspended from there, but I don't know the whole story.
I don't know either.
I just remember that dude. I met him once at the debate between Clinton and I don't know if I actually met him or was sitting next to him and Trump, and he was complaining about lefties getting on him.
Which one was that?
In Vegas. I like how Hugo comes out every time you say the word million when discussing the grifters Lincoln Project. Interview Steve again. MSNBC Seder. Cuts to military budget routed to infrastructure projects in said countries for providing power, etc. Yeah, indeed. New Wrangler. Reminder that Force the Sub got more done than Force the Vote. Keck W. Emma Pewbowner. You should watch Caitlin Bennett interview Marjorie Taylor Greene. It's hilarious. Marjorie said we have to abolish abortion and described it as canceling babies. Artie, Samuel, when you're turning the phones on, Americans are special kind of sick. Why have you been convinced that the problems of the rich are yours? Sorry, you're not going to be the next Jeff Bezos. You will send money to Israel to fund their unaffordable occupation while leaving yourself without universal health care. Indeed. Seder Simp, at the beginning of the show, you guys mentioned communities that don't want the vaccine. It should also be known that a large part of this community is the black community as well. Many NBA players don't want to take it. I don't know statistically if that's necessarily the case, but certainly there is a history in this country of black people being subjected to medical experimentation that could easily sort of like create a skepticism, no doubt.
Yeah, but I think I saw statistics that said that it wasn't like there was some of that, but it wasn't, to be compared with anti-vaxxers.
I think it's been overrepresented. A lot of, articles have been written about that.
And I would not be surprised if athletes are nervous about that stuff too, because
they don't want their bodies to have, any adverse reaction.
And God knows what they're putting into their bodies that they would be afraid of, but who knows? One End Burbank, Sam, now that I have to be awash in COVID cash, I can upgrade to the Ron Johnson $ per second membership level. Have your people call mine. Capino Fun. We need to know what Emma's favorite Pokemon is.
I don't know if I'm
just do it. Come on, you got one.
Well, I think I've said in the past that it was Charizard, or Charmander, but
okay.
Stick with it.
It's gonna be Dragonite.
Don't flip-flop on the Charmander.
Right.
A Square, Sam, Emma, been listening to Anna and Nando's show on Saturdays for some time, last 2 weeks. Much talk about the Dems' failures, etc. Surely many valid points, but concerned and disagree about their argument that we should have nothing to show for all the BLM protests because there's no labor gains. I think some of what we see in this COVID relief bill is due to BLM. Anna Nando arguments center on lack of labor power. Agree, this is central, but I don't see thoughts around how we unionize the knowledge workers in the PMC class. Would be good to hear you and Emma discuss this next time you invite on Anna. Good topic.
I didn't listen to Weekends this weekend. Sorry, Anna. So I can't really speak to that.
Mansion's Mansion. If they're doing a talking filibuster, don't you think Republicans are depraved enough to tag team an endless chain of talking filibuster? I'm sure there's a way that they would contemplate that not happening. Lawyer adjacent, Sam, you should introduce Saul to Roblox, great education game platform for kids. Roblox gets direct listing on New York Stock Exchange tomorrow at $45 per share, a premier child gambling platform, YOLO, investing opportunity. That sounds like somebody's pushing like a pump dump scheme. Roblox, though. I wonder if he does that. I'm so glad to hear super producer Matt is back on the ones and the twos. I'm such a lead head. Everybody calls me Leckhead Larry. This is Leckhead Larry. Is Matt going to check out the upcoming Pokemon game? It's going to be completely open world. Wish we had more Pokemon representation on the show.
Also, Matt, really impressive that in 4th grade you were able to recite all of the Pokemon in order.
I used to trace them too.
704 says, area code, congrats on the level 5 hype train. Thank you. And 704 area code says, missed the first half of the show. Have we discussed the Nevada Democratic Party? We did. Max in the BK, doesn't this speak to the danger on the left of allowing entry and building common cause with actors on the right? You articulate a vague notion of anti-imperialism. I don't know what you're referring to. Kylo 6. If they take an $11 minimum wage, we need to push them to have the minimum wage pegged to economic inflation. Yes, I'm pretty sure that was actually built into the $15 bill. But yes, but the thing is, you don't want to get stuck at that time. But yes, I agree. Needs to be indexed. Username. Thank you, Sammy. Buying Hello Tushy right now. Emoji of conservative. I disagree with Emma. Tucker is a master of vacuous Schrodinger's talking points. To the left, it sounds like an empty ringing of hypocrisy, but on the right, it's perceived as Democrats validating Trump's cruelty-focused immigration politics. Indeed. You want to say?
No. Go ahead.
2 more. Champagne communist. Sam, I recently saw a photograph of your calves back in the day, and I would love to know if you played soccer back then. Did a little bit as a kid, but I did some bike riding as a kid too, and part of it's just genetic. And the final the day. Sam from Ottawa, I actually made this comment about the military budget weeks ago. Turn the U.S. military into Greenpeace on steroids. Rebuild every country they've destroyed. Matt, Brendan, Emma, good job today. See you folks tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bar. But finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah.